I was supposed to die at birth. I was the second person in history to live through this weird congenital defect. The doctors gave me zero chance of survival. They did this, what was then experimental surgery, and it worked. And so when I found out I had this unexpected gift, I was kind of like, okay, so what do I do with this? And so that's why I went all down all these weird rabbit holes. Like I was going to be a lawyer because I thought I'd go into politics or pursuit of justice. Then I became a college professor, try to transform young minds. And then it was in entrepreneurship that it really started to sing to me. I actually believe, I had a conversation today just with some people about this, that entrepreneurship is one of the most powerful forces for positive social change. And I really believe that.
Hey, Warren, wanted to say thanks again. I'm really excited for the conversation today. And I wanted to kind of start with the question of what drove you to coaching? You have such a unique background, from the different businesses, and you mentioned, kind of your theater background and stuff like that. What makes you a coach? What made you do that?
Well, it's so I have to start the answer to that way back at birth.
Okay.
Because I was supposed to die at birth. I was the second person in history to live through this weird congenital defect. They
Wow.
the doctors gave me zero chance of survival. They did this, what was then experimental surgery, and it worked. And so when I found out I had this unexpected gift, I was kind of like, okay, so what do I do with this? And so that's why I went all down all these weird rabbit holes. Like I was going to be a lawyer because I thought I'd go into politics or pursuit of justice. Then I became a college professor, try to transform young minds. The arts, going into acting and theater directing, the transformative power of art, and all that kind of good stuff. And then it was in entrepreneurship that it really started to sing to me. I actually believe, I had a conversation today just with some people about this, that entrepreneurship is one of the most powerful forces for positive social change.
Hmm.
And I really believe that entrepreneurs create problems or create solutions to problems, create products, create opportunities, um, and so that's where I started to play. And then after the dot bust hit, I had a business back in the late 90s, and then the dot bust period hit. If people don't know that, that's when the dot com bubble burst and there was a big collapse in the economy. We kept going through that, but I sold my interest in the business to one of my partners. And then I was just looking for the next thing to do. And a family friend was doing this weird thing called business coaching I'd never heard of before. And I looked into it and it just was like, wow, this is exactly what I should be doing. And I
Hmm.
talked to friends and family about it, because I was looking for a new opportunity and I looked into it and everybody went, oh my God, that's going to be perfect for you. Because I've been a leader in different roles. I like to be creative. I like to support other people. I like business strategy. Um, and so it just seemed like the right thing to do. And I dove into it. That was in 2002 and haven't looked back.
No, that's pretty cool. And it's funny, it's come up multiple times in conversations with people how other people kind of have that insight into what you'd be good at.
Yeah.
And I like the way you put that about the positive change that entrepreneurship creates. Now, while entrepreneurship isn't for everybody, why do you think it's so powerful and transformative for people?
Well, it's transformative at two levels. One at a societal level, like when someone sees there's a problem and then they come up with a solution for it, it's transformative. I mean, the cell phone was an entrepreneurial initiative, right? That
Mm.
came out of, I mean, I actually met one of the founders of BlackBerry when they were just starting out, and there was no such thing. And now, like, our entire society has been transformed by that. And so entrepreneurship is the vehicle through which people actually use their creative faculties, and incentives and marshal resources of other people to try to solve problems. And entrepreneurs do it in a way that's fast, it's creative, it's collaborative, it's iterative. And so you wind up getting better solutions faster. At a personal level, it's transformative for both the entrepreneur and the people who work for them, because most people, you've probably been there yourself, most people start entrepreneurship without really knowing how bloody hard it's going to be, right? Like
Right.
there's actually some research on this, that people think entrepreneurs are risk takers, and they're not. What they are is they're optimists. And so they're so in love with their idea, they can't conceive of it not working, right? And
Yeah.
so then they go into it and it's like, holy crap, this is way harder than I thought it was going to be. And so then they have to grow, right? Like there's challenges that they never anticipated. And now I'm into this game, so I got to grow to meet the challenges. And so they start to transform. And then as their standards start to increase, then the people who are with them, their standards start to increase as well. So it becomes this sort of cascade of transformation with people around them. And that's where I think it's like super fun. Now that doesn't
Yeah.
happen to everybody. Some people get stuck, they stay where they are. The employees they have stay where they are, and they're the ones who feel stuck. They don't actually move forward. But when they get some help or get some education or do some daring or get in a networking group or mastermind group or whatever they do, that they get that little spark under them, then that's when that transformation happens and it becomes fun.
I like the way that you said about like if they're an optimist, not necessarily a risk taker. And one of the questions I got recently was about like what are the biggest challenges that someone faces when they're starting a business? And I kind of want to pose that to you because I feel like a lot of times we see this idea that, well, everybody should just have a business or it's so easy. And not only that, once you have a business, it should be just so easy to scale it to one, 10, $100 million. And it's like there are challenges and every one of those stages present different challenges. But for someone just starting out, what are some of those biggest challenges you think they face?
So let me take one step back. The statement that everybody should be entrepreneurs, I don't buy that.
Right.
Like I think, like society's built on people doing lots of different things. We need people who are going to be scientists. We need people who are going to be academics. We need people who are going to be political leaders. Like all those roles need to be filled. So I don't think I hear stuff like entrepreneurship is I believe entrepreneurship is a powerful force for positive social change, but it exists with a societal structure, you know?
Right.
And so I don't think everyone should be doing it. Um, the challenges that people face when they go into it are really, I'd say, threefold in terms of categories. They're relational, personal, and then kind of technical. At the personal level, you just you gotta have the resilience, right? Or the anti-fragility. That I remember I got a book my one of my parents gave me when I first started down the entrepreneurial path. And I don't remember anything in the book except the opening line, which was "Welcome to the Club of Terror."
Mm,
And I loved it. Like I thought, what a great framing because it means everybody has that experience. So you have to go into the entrepreneurial experience knowing it's going to be hard, right? And so the mental game of kind of going, oh my God, I did those 7 things and they didn't work. I really have to do the eighth one. Yeah, you do. And so you gotta toughen up your skin to be able to do that without losing your humanity and compassion and kindness and all of that too, right? So that the mental game of it is hard. And that's one of the major challenges that people have to overcome. And it's actually some of that research that said that optimists or that entrepreneurs are optimists. Some of the implication of that is that's why a lot of businesses don't grow, is because they start a business thinking everyone's going to love my idea. They find
right.
out it's harder. And so then they get to a certain level of economic security and they're like, frick, I'm not doing anything else. I don't
Right.
want to take any more risk. And so that sort of stabilizes where they are, but they don't go to that next level of getting to that 10 million, 100 million, whatever it is, because it's too scary or too hard. Whereas if you're always growing, you're going to get to the next piece. I said the second challenge is kind of relational. Entrepreneurship is a really interesting form of leadership. And a lot of entrepreneurs actually don't see themselves as leaders. They see themselves as sort of creators or service providers or, people who are solving a problem or people who are selling things, like different sort of identities. Um, and so they have peer-to-peer relationships with others and suppliers. Then they have to have a mentor leadership role with their staff. Then they have to have an external sort of confident interaction in the marketplace. So they're at a relational level, it requires a certain kind of agility, right? To be able to shift how you relate to people based on power structures, economic relationships, personal relationships. And that's sometimes a surprising challenge for people. And so they have to kind of grow into that. The successful entrepreneurs are the ones I find that are really successful at that. And then the third are just technical. Like business is a skill set, right? Like you don't get to just go out onto a basketball court and think you're going to be in the NBA, right? Like you got to do some training and you got to learn the skills. So business is the same thing. There's a whole set of skills. And most people go into entrepreneurship because of a personal passion, because they've got some technical expertise, or maybe they were forced into it by circumstances. But it's pretty rare that somebody does it because they went, I've done 5 years of study of business and I'm going to now deploy my new set of skills to my own enterprise. Like that's rare,
Right.
right? So most people enter into it, and they're kind of, there's that old saying, they're kind of building the plane in the air. And so you have to cultivate those skills. So I'd say that the main, you can go deep into each of those three areas, but categorically those are the three major chunks of challenges that people face.
Well, I feel like what that's encouraging, but also like scary, right? For some people. So like it's good that we can learn those skills, but say, I feel like I want to start a business. How would I know that entrepreneurship's right for me? Do you think there's something about somebody that says that, or is it truly just, hey, if you're passionate about something, you can learn the skills and develop these things along the way?
The latter, but
Okay.
with this qualification, like any activity, right? There are people who are just preternatural, like they're just gifted, right? In
Yeah.
any activity, you've got Mozarts and you've got people who can just pick up an instrument and play it, pick up a golf club and swing it, people who can get on a ski hill and ski it, people who can sing, can hear music. Like there's naturally gifted people, and entrepreneurship is the same. There are people who just have it. There's people who can sell to anybody without even trying. So, and that's what's sometimes discouraging to people. And that's sometimes what raises this mythology that entrepreneurship is just, you either are or you aren't. Like there's a certain mythology around that, right? That mythologizes the naturally gifted person as the entrepreneur. But like any other area of activity, Michael Jordan got cut from his high school basketball team because he wasn't good enough, right? And then he went and practiced like crazy and became great. Entrepreneurship is the same way. I've worked with people who were struggling, struggling, struggling. And when they started doing the disciplines, started learning the techniques, lo and behold, they started to succeed. And a lot of it is the work ethic that you put
Mm.
in and your commitment. There's lots, you'll hear lots of stories in almost every discipline. Kobe Bryant, I just watched an old video of his a while ago, where he was like, yeah, the people who were going to practice twice a week, doesn't matter how good they are, they're not going to outcompete the person who's practicing 4 hours a day, every day, in the morning and the evening. Like you're just not going to win against that person. And so entrepreneurship is the same. The person who puts in the miles is going to outperform the people that don't.
Yeah. That's very powerful information. And I want to switch now to, I know your specialty is kind of people that already have built a business, right? And are at a certain revenue point, but they feel stuck. And one of the things that you talk about is building a business that matters. What does that mean?
Yeah, so that goes back to my statement that entrepreneurship is a powerful force for positive social change.
Hmm.
To me, a business that matters is one that does generate a lot of income for the owner, but also has a positive impact in the world. And that can be in a lot of different ways. Some people, when they hear that, think it means, oh, you mean I have to do something for the environment or I have to do something for a cause. That's not what it means. You can do that, but you can also do things. I've got a client that his whole purpose is to give people a place where they can grow. Like that's why he runs the business, you know? And so it can be about, I had another client he actually went into the business because he was a customer in this industry and he thought the service standards sucked so badly that he wanted to just raise the service standards. So he did. He went in there and just made the business better than any competitors because of the way he did service. Some people, it's around providing customers great experiences, and then there are cause related. I had a client once. She was a really high end fashion designer. She wound up befriending somebody who was shot and paralyzed and was in a wheelchair, and wound up creating high fashion, what's called adaptive clothing. Clothing for people who are in wheelchairs because they got to be cut different and made. And so you can do product focused imp making the world a better place. You can do process-based ways of making the world a better place, like using environmentally safe products, looking at your supply chain, all that kind of thing. Or it can just be about people, like how you treat people, how you treat customers. But there's some values-based focus that you want your business to have an impact beyond just making money, and a positive impact. So that's what I mean by a business that matters, one that has a positive impact in some meaningful way to you, while generating a good profit.
No, I like the way you put that about it doesn't have to be this grand thing, right? Like one of the businesses that I'm in is plumbing. And it's like I talk to the team about it, and it's like you can think of it as I'm just going and doing this work for somebody. Or it could be that we're taking care of someone's most valuable asset, like their home. So that mindset around what you're doing and why it's important, I think can make a big impact, not only for entrepreneurs, but for their team.
Oh, and for you, the person themselves. It was a I think it was in the book Freakonomics or one of the Freakonomic books. There's a story about a hospital janitor who really was aware of the experience that of what patients and their families had and did
Yeah.
all these like little things like if somebody was in a moment of grieving or hard new no getting hard news, he just would leave and come back later even though it, messed up his shift, but he cared. And so that approach, right? In something that some people, I've always thought, I'm a big believer in what Martin Luther King said, like if you're going to be a street sweeper, be the best street sweeper you can be.
Yeah.
um and so that the janitor in that story was that kind of guy. And I think anybody can do that in any enterprise. And as a personal value, I like to support my coaching. I like to support people who embrace that. Like they want to be the best they can be and do the best for the people they serve without doing harm.
Yeah, my dad always told me that, and when I was younger, I didn't understand it. But he was like, "If you're doing a job, do it to the best of your ability, and like no matter what that job is." And I'm like, "Well, that just doesn't make sense." But as you get older, you realize like someone's always watching, or someone, it makes an impact. And it's like that's valuable information that it's hard to always do in the moment, but if you can think long term about it, it
Yeah.
makes a difference.
Well, you're always watching. Even if nobody else is,
That's
you're always watching.
what do you mean by that? Break that down for me a little bit.
So you know if you're not doing your best.
But how does that impact you, right? Like, why does
So
that matter?
great. So this could venture into spiritual, but I actually think it's psychological as well. Um, I think we all So if you go way back to the ancient Romans, there's a term called eudaimonia, which is a good soul. And it's often translated to mean happiness, but it's a little bit more than that. Like it's when we think of happy, it's sort of, oh, look at me, I'm happy, kind of flighty. Eudaimonia is like a deeper sense of personal fulfillment. And it really comes through struggle and challenge, you know, that when you actually take on hard tasks and overcome them, you prove to yourself your own mettle and your own character, and that fills you up.
Hmm.
And so when you kind of cheat, you know, probably we all as kids at one point or another, we sort of cut some corners in a sport or a game or something. And even if you win, you don't really feel good about it because
Yeah.
right? You were there, you watched what you did. So it doesn't actually make you as happy or as fulfilled as when you do your best. When you do your best, you are like, I'm moving into my best self. That fills you with pride, that fills you with confidence, it fills you with enthusiasm about what you're doing. And so you feel better when you do your best. And that's actually there's an old quote that says something to the effect of, we don't succeed for what we get, we succeed for what we become. It isn't
Mm,
the money, it's the who you become through the challenge that gets you there.
I like that. Do you think it's transferable, that idea, that or that mindset to go into things and doing your best? Do you think we can transfer that to our teams? Or is
Hmm.
it, and how so then?
Well, let me qualify it. It
Okay.
depends on how there are people for sure who don't care. Like they've
Right.
been trained and or raised a certain way that substandard is acceptable, and it may be that they devote their best to another area of their life. Like maybe they've got kids at home, or they coach teams, or they've got maybe they're an artist and they're working on their craft and their job is just a job.
Right.
You know, um, I still think showing up at your best at whatever you're doing is ultimately more fulfilling for you. But if someone isn't receptive to the message, you can't force it on them, right? But from an organizational standpoint, can you make an organization one that is all built on that everybody trying to do their best? 100%. And there's a couple of steps to that. One is having standards for yourself, having a really clear culture expectation. I call it a high performing culture. A lot of people talk about having nice cultures or fun cultures or other terminology around cultures. The terminology I use is high performance culture, because a high performance culture is one where, again, using a sports metaphor, no one likes to be on the line with the slacker, right? Because the game isn't as fun. If in
Hmm.
hockey someone doesn't go in the corner to get the puck, like everybody loses. Like the game just isn't as fun. If you're not going to rebound, in a basketball game, like the game's not as fun for everybody when you got a teammate who you can't rely on. So in an organization, you want to have a culture that says this is who we are. And then you want to recruit to that culture. So you don't, settle for people who don't actually share that set of values. And when you recruit to those values, and then you have to train people on those values, because let's be frank, our society right now is not one. I heard a phrase recently: we optimize for comfort, not for happiness. We optimize for comfort, not for fulfillment. And so the messages that we get culturally are kind of to take the easy way, to take the comfortable way. And so you're fighting counterculturally a lot of influences that are out there, right? It's easier to just surf the internet or have stuff delivered to you than to actually put in the effort. And so you're fighting that kind of influence. But if you do, you're going to build a great organization. And here's the secret that shouldn't be a secret, but I believe is foundationally the truth. People actually want to be challenged. People want to grow. When you put a kid on a, I don't care what the team is, soccer team, hockey team, ski team, dance team, whatever it is, they want to succeed, right? And when there's a ball down there, they're going to chase it. They're going to go
Mm.
hard at it, right? Because that's where the fun is. Sitting there watching the ball go by is freaking boring. But going at it is where the fun is. And so if you build an organization where people are being challenged, not so challenged that they feel like they can't do it, like not where their confidence gets undermined. Like if their comfort zone is here, take me to here, right? And then it goes this big, and then it's like take me a little further, right? If it's just outside my comfort zone every time, and then I stretch and can do it, then it's like that's fun.
I think it was a few months ago I reread Drive by Daniel Pink, and it talks about like the motivational factors. Whereas, like, I think societally we think about external motivators a lot of times, like,
Mhm.
oh, well, if we just offer this X amount of dollars or these benefits, when really, if you can, cultivate those intrinsic motivations, which is that fulfillment, and like you said, it's that key balance of being challenged just enough that you want to keep working at it and then succeed, but not too much to where it's like it's oh, this is an overwhelming task.
Right.
And how do you think that there's strategies or is there specific things that entrepreneurs need to do to create that high performance culture within
Oh,
their
yeah.
organization? Or is it, just by leader, like the way that I operate and carry myself can drive that? Or are there strategies that we should
No, there are
implement?
absolutely strategies because you're working with human beings, right? And not everybody. It's one of the things I actually learned from theater directing,
Okay.
um, that everybody's different. I remember directing this play, and there was like one person, if I criticized him, he'd crumble like a leaf. And there was somebody else who wanted to be pushed to the wall. Somebody else needed to be approach things psychologically. Somebody else needed kind of physically. So one of the roles of a leader is to actually see who you have in front of you and what are the approaches that are going to help for that individual. So just modeling leadership absolutely is a great thing. So it's necessary, but it's not sufficient. So some of the things to actually build a high performance culture: A, you have to articulate the values that are critical to this organization, and then set behaviors and standards that illustrate what those values mean. I think a lot of people know about values, but they don't take it to that next step, and that's where they fall down. So you go into organizations and you can see on the bulletin board in the kitchen, here's our 4 core values, right? But there's nothing behind them other than the words. And so what does excellence mean, right? What does service mean? Like those words are kind of empty until you put something behind them. So let me give you just one perfect
Please.
example of this. A client of mine. So like a lot of companies, they have some value related to customer orientation or customer focus or customer service, right? Like a lot of everybody says that. So here's the story. They were an event company, that did like high end events for at the corporate level, where they take you know executives down to Acapulco for a 5-day retreat or something like that. And so they got a call from a competitor's client who said, "We got a big problem. We have a bunch of executives leaving in 3 days, and the plane is broken down, and we don't have a solution, and our current provider doesn't have a solution for us." So my client, basically everybody in the organization stopped what they were doing and started phoning all over the world. They found the Toronto Raptors airplane or something like that, sitting on a tarmac in Florida or California. I can't remember where it was exactly. Um, and so they wanted to book the plane for the client. They found the plane at 5:30 at night after the banks had closed. The company credit card, it cost $120,000 roughly to secure the plane. Company credit card only had $55,000 of room on it. Every single person in the company, including their junior summer student, took out their personal credit cards to secure the plane for the client. That's what we mean by commitment to customer.
That
That's a whole new level. Like, you hear that, if you're a customer, you hear that story, you're like, I don't want to use anybody but them,
yeah.
right? Like, and if you think about that, think about what the culture must be in that company for people to feel willing to do that. Like the level of trust they have in leadership, the level of trust they have in each other, the commitment that they have to the client, the desire to win, right? The generosity of spirit. Like you can just, that story tells you everything about that culture.
That seems like an extreme example. Is that possible everywhere?
Probably not everywhere, to be realistic. No, I mean, I'm a realist,
Yeah.
like not everybody's going to do that. But you can raise, and I wouldn't want that to be the norm. Like, I don't want people all, thinking they got to put their own finance. There was a high level of trust in this organization. Everybody
Right.
knew what the financial health of the business was. No one was at risk of losing anything, right? In that case. So I'm not advocating, having expectations that people are going to open up their personal bank accounts for your business. That's not what I mean by high performance culture. It's more just that commitment and passion.
Right.
Um, but yeah, you can build organizations that really, really care. And to your point, like whether it's plumbing, I've got clients that do window cleaning, and it's not about window cleaning, right? It's the owner tells a story about an older woman who during COVID couldn't go outside and her house was dirty, and she hired them to clean their windows, and it was like she had a new lease on the world. Like there was brightness coming into her world again. So to them, it's not cleaning windows. It's we're giving people light. We're
Hmm.
giving, and so any business can be built around that kind of idea. And then when there are core values in this is how we behave. This is how we treat each other. And they're not all kumbaya. Like there can be badass. Like excellence means excellence. Nothing leaves this door of our building unless it is good, like really good. And so when you build those standards, then it's like, damn, yeah, we don't hit the court unless we're going to play hard.
So why would a business not have those standards? Or what's the hard part about it? Because everybody in their mind thinks, well, yeah, I want to have these things. I want to implement these things. And it sounds good. Is it just when it comes to the follow through and the holding people accountable that it becomes a challenge? What is it that stops people from being able to implement it?
A few things. First is belief. A lot of people don't know it's possible because
Okay.
there's a whole narrative, right? If you hang out with a bunch of entrepreneurs, they're going to tell you how, oh, people are the biggest pain and you can't find good people. And oh my God, my business would be better if I didn't have those people working for me, right? And so there's this whole self-reinforcing narrative that it's just not possible, right? So you get that. Second is again technique. Like there are skills like that, how you build values, how you articulate behaviors, and then how you reinforce them in the organization. You know, I've got a client who one of his things, he's got a book of the month club. Like everybody in the organization reads the same book every month. At the end of the month, they get together and say, how can we apply this either in our personal lives and our business? If the answer is we can't, they jettison the book. If they can, they figure out how to incorporate it. That organization has grown like crazy, right? But he was like values driven, put behaviors behind it. He brought in a sort of life coach with everybody in the organization to have access to, like did a bunch of stuff. But it isn't. I almost want to dial back when I said that. So a high performance culture, as distinct from a nice culture, a nice culture is one where the company is always doing things for the people. We got the foosball table, we bring in the massage therapist, we do Fridays at lunch and all that kind of nice stuff. And it's give, 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 right? There's no reciprocity there. You have to have high expectations too. Yep, we're going to do those things from you, but you're going to deliver. And a lot of people are uncomfortable with creating that level of accountability. and having the hard conversations with people about what expectations actually are. And so someone doesn't perform and then they let it slide and then the conversation's uncomfortable and they don't think they can get somebody else. And so it's just really, it's like I said, our cultural messaging is that things should be comfortable and should be relatively easy. This kind of work is hard. Like it's hard to hold people to high standards, you know?
Uh, I I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I agree because I remember, when I first got into it, I took over a business that was in my family, and it's like I know the most important thing to me was like creating this place that everybody was like wanted to work. And it's like everybody thinks that, and it's like with it, oh, everyone's just gonna be so happy to get there because I give so much to them. But I think there's a piece of that that they also want to work at a place that has high standards, that holds people accountable. People actually want that. They want to know that there's accountability and that there's a reason behind what they're doing, that there's purpose to it. Do you think
Hmm.
that that tension though is what stops people? Like they think, because sometimes it's difficult conversations and you hate to do that to people, but I mean, sometimes you have to do it. But that tension is what
Yes.
I think could prevent someone from actually putting it in place.
Yeah, I think people are uncomfortable. They also don't know how to have the conversation
Okay.
and they're not 100% confident what the other side of this looks like. Like until you've been through it. I have a client that they do really well. They're rapidly growing business. They've got, I don't know, 40 team members. They've got an executive team. Um, and then they hired a new executive team member. And we'd had some conversations about this. I said, it's sort of like there's a difference between junior A players and NHL players, using a hockey analogy. Like there's a
Hmm.
difference, right? The junior A's are good, like they're
Oh
good,
yeah.
high caliber players, but they're not NHL, and they hired somebody who's NHL and they were like, oh,
That makes sense.
oh, now I see. Like people talk about standards,
Right.
right? But until you've actually experienced it, right? Until you've actually gone, oh, that's what better actually looks like. You kind of don't know what you're aiming for. Right. And I've had lots of conversations with clients where we're trying to set the standards and I can just see they haven't hit it. They haven't experienced it yet. And then once they see how it can be, then they never want to go back.
That's a really good. I've never thought of it in that way. But like I played sports growing up, and it's like you can see, as you progress through the levels, there's big differences. I mean, and it's like then the difference between like a professional and what even like a college level or like you're saying like a semi-pro level, it's like I mean, it's a big jump, and you don't
Yeah.
realize it until you're around it.
But within that, what's important, I think, for a leader to be a fair and like sort of ethical driven leader as well, is it's okay for some people to want to play junior. Like not everybody has to want to play NHL. But if you want to create an NHL team, helping someone to go find an organization that plays at the junior level, like releasing it isn't necessarily like firing someone because they're bad. You don't have to like judge people negatively because of what's important in their life. As I said, they may have other things in their home life that are more important than playing NHL. And if that's the case, then fine. Or some people don't have the talent to play NHL, but they still work hard. So the message, you still got to treat everyone with respect. Like when you're raising this high performance standard, do it without judgment to the people who don't meet the standards. There's still a humanity there.
But so and maybe you answered it because my next question was gonna be what if there's someone that's not buying into it, that doesn't want to be challenged? Like you said, that maybe one is okay being a junior player. What is that where you just say like you literally, hey, well let me help you find somewhere else that's a better fit because here's what we're gonna do. Is that literally the answer to
Yeah.
it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Now some people you give them the invitation. Like I see in you the potential to perform better, but it means you'll have to do things that maybe at a level you're not used to. I think you should take a couple days, maybe go and talk to your spouse or your partner and think about what you want to do. And some people do it. I had this actually one of my very best friends. He knows what I do, and he's an entrepreneur. And it was one of those moments in a friendship. It's like really, because he actually said, "Warren, you've known me for a long time. I'm going to share with you my goals, which he did. What do you think I need to do to get there?" And I went, "It was a moment in a friendship, right? Like,
Yeah.
you want the truth, And he said yes. And I said, "Okay, so dude, you have one of the highest levels of commitment to work-life balance of any entrepreneur I know, and I respect that. And if you want to get to the goals you just articulated, you are way too skewed on the life side of your balance right now. If you want to get there, you need to go home to your spouse this afternoon and say, this is what life is going to look like for the next 3 months. Just 3 months. But this is what it needs to look like. And he said, okay. And he did it. And at the end of the 3 months, he doubled his business. But it's like you can do that with an employee. Like if you
Mm,
want to get to be the vice president, if you want to, get into this new role, here's what you need to do. Like this is just the requirement, because you got to get to that standard. Do you want to do it? If you do, I am going to support you all the way. If you don't, that's okay.
right.
Like I'm not requiring you to do it. I'm not demanding you do it. I'm not judging you if you don't want to do it. But if you don't want to do it, that role isn't available for you. And there's an old a saying I use sometimes, which is just everybody deserves to be an A player somewhere.
I mean, that
And
kind
if
of
you,
makes sense.
yeah, if you got it, and that's why that's in sports, right? You got different levels of players, right? So you'll be on the, you know, B level team as opposed to the double A, and somebody's going to be the best player on the B level team. They'd be the worst player on the double A team, but they get to experience being the best player on the team at B.
I d-
And
Yeah.
what a great experience for them.
Well, and it's a good way to look at it because there's also room in the marketplace for that too, right? Like a customer may
Yeah,
not want to pay for the A team to come in.
absolutely. That's why we have different, some people can't afford it, some people don't want it, some people don't care about it. I mean, not everybody eats out at the fancy restaurant. Some people go to McDonald's, right?
Yeah.
Because it's just what they want right then. And so everybody fills a niche if there's a demand for it, which is great.
So is and I'm going to take a jump here, but when we think about, part of what you talked about with an entrepreneur and getting to the places they want to get to was, finding like whether it be mentorship or a coach or whatever. Is that because it fills that gap in whether it be lack of knowledge or also time? So we can expedite some of the things that, hey, I need to make this change in my business, but maybe I don't know how, or what is it that coaching or mentorship relationship helps an entrepreneur do?
A few things, and it depends really on the nature of the coach and coaching relationship. And there's different kinds, right? So there are coaches who really deal more like with mental blocks and that kind of stuff to get you to take action. And then there's coaching that's more training based, and then there's coaching that's really accountability based. I'm a bit of a hybrid of all three, leaning more towards the latter two. Like I do when I do the sort of mental game coaching, it's usually within the context of trying to implement some strategy. That someone will do a sales strategy and then they won't follow up on the sales. I had this with a client once. We did some marketing, turned into some great results, and then he didn't follow up on the leads. And I was like, "Well, what's going on?" And he gave me some excuse, and I said, "Well, tell me what you think of salespeople." "Oh, I think they're slimy and manipulative and pushy." And I was like, "Okay, so let's talk about sales and actually what it is, because you're not going to sell effectively if that's what you believe about sales." So then we got into the mental game there. So my approach isn't like I don't have a module on let's now talk about your mental orientation, right? And there's people who do that and it works perfectly well for me because I like to help people get there fast and it's usually business focused. My thing is around the skills, the strategy, the planning, and the accountability to make sure that the stuff gets done. So how does a coach help? So in that kind of context, it's really around what a lot of entrepreneurs do is they play whack-a-mole, right? It's they're very
Mhm.
reactive to stuff that's coming up. And so they're never actually moving forward in a coherent, consistent direction because they're always reacting to things. So the first thing I try to get them to do is say, okay, let's choose. You want to go here. Here's the plan to get you there, and then here's the methodology by which you execute that plan. And in the course of executing that plan, there's going to be training. So if somebody, doesn't have training in sales, we're going to do some sales training. If they don't have any training in recruitment, we're going to do some training in recruitment or system development or whatever it happens to be. And then there's the accountability piece. So the plan said, you're going to do this week. Did you do it? Well, no, I didn't. Okay, what was the obstacle? Let's deal with the obstacle. Well, I didn't know how to do it. Okay, we got to move into some training. Oh, I was scared. Okay, that's a mental health, or not a mental health, but a mental game piece, right? Oh, I was too busy. Okay, so we got a time management piece, right? So it's always what's the solution to the problem,
Hmm.
right? And that's where coaching really helps, because the coach's job is always, there's a problem, what's the solution? How do we brainstorm the solutions? How do we pull the solutions out? How do we craft new solutions? On their own, what happens to people is when they hit an obstacle, it's kind of like, oh, what do I do now? Right? And they kind of sit with it for a while. Whereas a coach will kind of encourage you to say, okay, that happened. Great. What's next? Your goal hasn't changed. You still want to get there. So sitting on your duff whining ain't going to get you there. So what's going to be the action? And so coaches really encourage action.
Do you think it's important to, and this is kind of a two-part question, but is it important to find the right fit when I'm thinking about, oh, I need a coach or mentorship? Because like you said, there's different aspects to it. So maybe right now I need someone to really help more with the mental block side of it versus the strategy. And then
Mhm.
the second piece of that would be like, do you ever then say, okay, well, someone reaches out, but I think you'd be a better fit for someone like this? Or is it always down to like strategy with a little bit of those other things in, like that
No,
hybrid
I've
model?
sent people to other things for sure.
Okay.
And I think for a couple of reasons. One, just ethically, I shouldn't be acting for somebody if I'm not the best choice for them, right? Like that, I just shouldn't do that. Secondly, from a marketing perspective, it's actually pretty interesting to see the impact on that. Like I had a guy just a while back who, laid out their concerns, and I said, well, okay, I can help you with that, but there's a part-time CFO is really what you need. They're gonna be better than me at that. I can do it, but they're gonna be better than me at it, and they're gonna be more dedicated to you. And so the other issues, I think you got to get your that part of your financial stuff in order first, work with them, and then come back to me. And they were like, "So you're not you can do it, but you're not trying to sell us into it." No, I want you to get the right help so that when you're in that position, then I can help you with the stuff that I'm best at. And so from a marketing perspective, like they go and tell people that this guy, he didn't even try to sell me on it. He sent me to somebody who he thought was better,
Mm.
and that builds, I think, credibility and integrity, and it is just integrity as well.
Well, that's encouraging to hear because it's like sometimes there's a fear around like not necessarily turning down work, but you almost think, especially when you're trying to build a business, like, oh, I should take everything. But it's like, no, you should take the things that you can actually provide the most value for, not necessarily
Yeah,
just take people's money just to do it.
that's right. Yeah. And then there's sometimes, I had somebody once, her business was in really rough shape, and she had no money to pay me, and it was like, she was like, "I'll pay with my credit card." I said, "No, you're not going into debt to help me." So I gave her like some free materials. I sent her into a training resource where some of the foundational stuff she could learn from them, in a more cost effective way, and implement it. Because at the end of the day, I got to be helping people, not hurting people.
And I think about that with, like our team, it's like, if we do something and we screw up at somebody's house, it's like I'm always of the mindset like, well, we don't maybe it's like, yeah, we probably should credit some of that invoice back or whatever it may be. It's like, because we didn't add value. If we came in, we didn't do something for you, or we, God forbid, harmed something, it's like, you shouldn't pay for that. That's not what we're here for. So, like, it's just encouraging to hear that, like, I think that successful businesses think that way, but maybe not everybody. And I think that's a differentiator. Like, if you can build your business in a way that is like, I truly want to actually add value, um, I think that goes back to being a business that matters. Like part of
Yeah.
being something that matters is being of value to people.
Yeah. And when you can do that, it's really satisfying. Like, to be a little bit boasty, I guess. But last year in 2022, I ran sort of an analysis of all my clients' results, and like the average revenue increase was 2.3 million, and the average profit increase was about $420,000. And none of the clients lost anything. So the average was high, and the downside was still on the positive. So everybody grew, and then the growth was actually averaged really high. Now I can't take credit for all of that. I mean, the clients did the work, right? I just coached them, but I can feel good about, if I say to someone, I'm not the right person to help you, then I'm not. But on the other hand, if I say that I can help you, probably a good chance I can.
Is there a like a small number of factors that you help those clients with that made that transformation, or is it kind of about the whole process, the whole strategy of the
It's the whole
business?
process.
Yeah.
Yeah, because there's a framework for growth, and it depends on where everybody is, and everybody's at a different place. So there are coaching programs that are very curriculum based. Um,
Yeah.
Mine isn't. I mean, the only curriculum piece I have is I need to know your numbers, and we've got to get into a rhythm of 90-day strategic planning. That's the foundational structure that I want to see. But within that, the plan is going to reveal, or the planning process is going to reveal that one person, it's their people is the big problem. Somebody else, it's a culture problem. Somebody else, it's a cash flow problem. Somebody else, it's they don't have a unique selling proposition. Somebody else is, they got a competitive challenge. So the coaching always builds around whatever the core problems are, and that's why the planning process is so important. Is one of the things that entrepreneurs do wrong is they confuse symptoms with problems. And so they go and attack the symptom rather than get at the problem. And so then their business doesn't actually accelerate because they're just continually painting over a patch in the wall rather than actually get to the problem.
Do you have an example of that? Like where we think that the symptom is actually what the issue is?
Yeah, probably several. What would be a really good
I
example of
didn't mean
that?
to put you on the spot, but I think it's worth breaking down a little bit.
Yeah, a classic one is oh yeah, okay. Here's a great one. um, I had a client who was growing like crazy, but was gonna go out of business. He had a cash flow problem. Thought he had a cash flow problem. That's what he was saying. My cash is there, so he was thinking I got to collect more for my people, or doesn't know what it was.
Yeah.
And so I went in and kind of dove into the numbers. And basically, what happened was he commissioned his sales guy on revenue, but didn't have any price requirements on the guy. So the guy was out there discounting the services. So he was selling a whole bunch, which meant he had to grow. So this was a guy doing a plumbing business actually.
Okay.
And so he was adding crews and adding trucks and adding equipment. So he was outlaying all this cash to facilitate the growth. But because the salesperson was discounting the prices, the margins weren't there to support it. And so at first he says, well, I got to raise my prices. And I was like, no, what you need to do is change the commission structure for your salesperson to commission them on gross margins, not on revenue. So what looked like either a cost management problem or a pricing problem was actually a people problem, that this guy was frankly selfish and was just wanting to make money for himself at the expense of the business. And so we had to change his commission structure. So it's like yet we had to get to the real problem that was driving this in the company. Because if he was tinkering around with pricing and cost, he would have been out of business. But once now the salesperson wasn't too happy with me. Um,
But your job wasn't to make them happy; it was to keep the business alive, right?
yeah, exactly. But
No,
he
that I
actually
appreciate.
understood at the end of the day, right? Like it was
Yeah.
fair.
Of course. And I appreciate you breaking that down because that is a good example. And it's like, you talked about like these 90-day kind of implementation cycles. That doesn't necessarily mean like, hey, I want to do one 3-month thing and then everything, all my problems are going to go away. Because
No,
one thing that one thing that you realize is once you fix something, it's like, well, then the next thing arises. And with growth comes new challenges and new factors that you have to deal with. But so what does that look like in your program? Like, hey, is it just prioritizing the issues and then tackling it? Hey, this 90 days, this is the one thing we're focused on fixing, or how does that work?
so I built a tool that actually automates the whole front end of the strategic planning process because I found when I was trying to get people to do it on their own, it was a bit cumbersome or they needed to rely on me too much. So I built this tool that basically asks roughly 350 questions about the business.
Hmm.
And it automatically populates a SWOT analysis of strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And then from there, we pull out kind of a strategic focus. What are your core priorities out of that? Some people might be familiar with something called OKRs, objectives and key results. So that's one model. There's another model, which is what they're called rocks. Your key priorities are called rocks. Doesn't matter to me. They're all, different terminology around the same thing. But we take this big SWOT analysis, distill it down into a small one, take the themes that emerge from that, choose one or two areas of focus, pull out 3 or 4 priorities in that area of focus, and then just build the action steps around that. And then every quarter it's kind of rinse and repeat. You only have to do the big question thing once a year. But then we pull out the themes throughout the year to build each 90-day plan. Now, it is not the case, just to set expectations, it's not the case that every problem is containable within a 90-day period, right? Like there's some tasks that go on for 2 or 3 quarters. But what you're doing is every quarter revisiting things and saying, okay, we got to here. Where do we get to next? And from a culture perspective, I'll tell you one of the fascinating things about this that I've seen over and over again. Um, it takes 2 quarters for this to actually start working within the business in most businesses. And the reason is, and this is for every entrepreneur listening to look in the mirror on this is what happens. Most entrepreneurs are out there and they have some new idea, or they went to a weekend course, or they talk to somebody like me, and they come into the office and they go, we're doing this thing now, right? And then within a month, it withers on the vine and dies. So everybody in the company's just learned, he came from a workshop, he's got a new idea, just keep your head down, it'll go away like all the other ones, right? And so there's a certain cynicism that exists within the business because the leader has been inconsistent, right? Because the leader is starting something new all the time and doesn't finish it, and people just, I'm just going to do my job and that'll blow away. When you actually implement something like this, here's what happens. The first quarter, people will pay it lip service. But if you stick it through the whole quarter and then you go, okay, we successfully executed 70% of the things on our plan. We were short on 30. So this time we got to try to do that a little better. So here's our next plan. Then they're like, oh, she's serious about this. We're actually doing this. We're actually continuing with this whole planning process and then executing what's on the plan. And we're talking about this every week. Wow. Okay. And then by the end of the second quarter, it's like we hit 95% of the stuff on our plan. We frickin' rock. Then people are like, so let's build the next plan. Okay, let's do that. And you wind up actually generating trust from the team that we now have a direction. We now will know where we're headed. Everyone has clarity about what they're supposed to be doing. The expectations are clear. The boss is making sure this stuff happens. This is a freaking great place to work, right? Because there's certainty, there's growth, there's challenge. All of that stuff is there. This now becomes an enjoyable place to be. As long as you're not, what the one mistake people make in this is in the first quarter, they do the analysis, they do the SWOT, and they go, oh my God, we got 23 things to fix. And so they try to fix 23 things in one quarter, and it doesn't work.
But is there a balance between, and I think you've alluded to it, but I want to get specific when we say, well, I want to build good company culture, but I also want to implement these strategies to whether it be fix the cash flow or fix this one aspect of it, or is there a balance between the two, or are they like synergistic? Like when you fix
Completely
one,
synergistic.
okay,
And there's an old saying that culture eats strategy, and I used to say that, and I don't believe that now.
okay,
It is true that a high performing culture without strategy will often outperform a company with a strategy with a crappy culture. But where you have an organization that has culture and strategy, what happens is this is what happens. Strategy says what needs to be done, culture makes sure that it gets done. And
well,
that's why it's synergistic, because the strategy makes everybody super clear. Use the sports team thing again, right? Like if everybody knows that so I grew up in the heyday of the Edmonton Oilers hockey team when Wayne Gretzky was a player, right?
okay,
And so the coach of that team, Glenn Sather, said, we're building an offensively driven organization built around this guy, right? And so they like their top defender was Paul Coffey, who was like an incredibly offensive defenseman. Like everything in this organization was built on offense, right? So then it's like we know what our job is. We know how we win. We know what everybody's role is. We know what the expectations are, and that works. And so and you can do that within, doesn't have to be sports, you can do that in arts. When I was a theater director, right, the first meeting I ever had with my whole cast and crew was, this is the vision for the play, this is what we're going to achieve, this is what we're trying to communicate with it, this is how we're going to get there, here's the rehearsal schedule, we're going to know every scene that we're going to work on every day of the next 6 weeks. And it provides so much confidence in the minds of everybody participating that they get on board. And so that combination of having a really clear strategy and having this culture of high performance, it really produces great outcomes. And it ultimately makes your job as the entrepreneur easier.
Makes sense, and that's the ultimate goal, right? It's to be kind of at the top working on a business, not in it, and having that culture around you that is it's just rewarding whenever you feel like, the people here are happy and they're all striving for a singular goal.
Right. One of
What
the things, can I that line, on versus in?
Yeah.
I just want to give like permission to some entrepreneurs, like that's often trotted as the way it must be.
Mhm.
Um, and the reality is there are some entrepreneurs who really like being in the business.
Yeah.
They're technicians and that's okay. Like you don't have to always be on the business. Sometimes you can. I've got a client right now. One of the one of the ownership team wants to be in the business, and the other two are on it. So you can partner with people. You can hire people to work on the business. Like the idea is just that someone needs to be working on the business, but it is not a sin for an entrepreneur with a personal passion or technical skill to want to work in the business.
I appreciate you calling me out on that because I think we get too stuck on absolutes. Kind of like I was talking in the beginning, where everyone should have a business or everyone's business should get to this revenue number. Like you got to have like you said, that it's okay and to do what makes you happy or what makes you comfortable in your business. It doesn't have to be what these societal implications are.
Yeah. Yeah, there's organizations I know and have been part of where there's this heavy testosterone driven
Yeah.
pressure that you got to grow, you got to be growing all the fast, you got to be hitting this number. Well, who says that?
Why?
Yeah, like it's your life. That's the beauty of entrepreneurship is it's your life.
Hmm.
So you get to decide what you want to do. If you're making $150,000 and you're happy with that, great. If you want to make 500,000, great too. There's just, there's a cost to doing it. And some people are like, you know what, my family is my family life. I want to be around when my kids are this age. And so I don't want to be gone, 18 hours a day. Okay. You shouldn't be criticized for that. That's
Right.
a fair value choice.
What does growth look like for you? What's next for Warren in your business and in your entrepreneurship journey?
Ah, you're going to make me reveal something early. I'm
Why you don't have to.
No, no, it's fine. If people, I'm actually in the process of building something right now that I'm super excited about. Um, I've actually, over the years, I've built a lot of tools and frameworks and stuff like this. So I'm going to take my entire coaching framework and tools and resources and platforms, and I'm going to create basically, what would I call it? A platform by which people can access all the materials as they need. It's almost going to be like a self-coaching platform. I'm going to have
Mhm.
videos of me showing you how to use this stuff, when to do it. You're going to be able to work through this strategy tool. So you're going to know what your area of focus should be. Given your area of focus, you can just click a button and say, if my area of focus was recruitment, you're going to be taken to a module on how to recruit. And then here's the tools that you can use in support of that. Again, connecting with some other software for doing your financial management, all this kind of stuff. So it's going to be like almost a comprehensive. It's not a course because a course is like I'm just learning a curriculum and hopefully I'll apply it someday. But this
Mhm.
is like this is where you are in your business right now. This is what you need to do, and then there'll be some coaches associated with it. So should you want the accountability, should you want some additional feedback and input, that resource will be available to you. But you could basically self coach yourself through the business.
That's pretty cool. So it's not only scaling, but you could almost offer it for people at a lower price point as well, just to get this
Yeah,
access to the
totally.
same thing.
Yeah.
That's awesome, man. Well, where can people find you, follow along, see whenever this new platform's live?
Yeah, so I'm actually just launching a new website shortly, but it's at warrencoghlin.com. So Coughlin is spelled Coughlin .com, and I'm also on LinkedIn and Instagram and Threads.
Awesome, man. Well, hey, you added a lot of value to me and I know to the listeners today, so I appreciate it.
Oh, my pleasure. It was a fun conversation. Thanks for having me on.
Of course.